Since a while, I have been talking with my therapist about how lost I feel in life sometimes, how overwhelmed and confused, and especially how indecisive. In the course of my still young life, I already had about 9 kinds of jobs in 4 different kinds of fields, and I had many more ideas of where I could be heading instead, including architecture, interior design, car mechanic, and astronaut. And now, just last month, things outside of my control put me at a crossroads in life again, where I have to make important decisions, especially in regards to my career. I'm thinking university, teaching, psychology, social work, nursing, and even military or pilot's license. Thus, I'm overwhelmed and confused once again. Now, parallel to me being a headless chicken and whining about it to my therapist, I am also reading Plato's Republic with my morning tea at the moment. And when I reached the point where he describes the democratic person, it struck me. Democracy is to blame for my misery. Not really, of course, and not in a political sense anyway. But the way Plato describes the human counterpart to the governmental system of democracy made me realize how I was stuck in a fantasy of individualism and endless opportunities. And I consciously choose the word fantasy because my personal experience with apparently boundless freedom has shown me that the same positive qualities of it can have a negative impact on an individual living in such a reality if there is no, drumroll please, balance. While I'm making these videos, I myself am realizing how insanely important balance really is. Like eating too much ice cream is bad on so many levels, but eating absolutely no ice cream is just depressing and a life not worth living. A truly balanced diet needs the occasional gelato, or else there would be no point in having taste buds. Now let's first take a look at the paragraph of Plato's Republic that made me feel as if Plato was speaking directly to me when he was describing the democratic person. He indulges in every passing desire that each day brings. One day he gets drunk at a party, the next day he's sipping water and trying to lose weight. Then again, he sometimes takes exercise, sometimes takes things easy without a care in the world, and sometimes he's apparently a student of philosophy. At frequent intervals, he gets involved in community affairs, and his public speaking and other duties keep him leaping around here, there, and everywhere. If military types arouse his admiration, he inclines towards the military life. If it's businessman, he's all for business. His lifestyle has no rhyme or reason, but he thinks it enjoyable, free, and inviolable, and he never dispenses it. 400 BC, a bearded guy with a knack for mathematics describes my struggle today. And I wonder, are we absolutely not evolving psychologically? I mean, we can travel to the moon now, but we are still just as confused on a personal level as we apparently were centuries ago, sporting sandals in Athens. Just some food for thought for another video. Now, obviously, Plato was not that fond of the idea of democracy, because politically it is a flawed system in his eyes. But that's not what I found so striking about it. I was instead really baffled by how this system that fosters freedom, individuality, and equality is a wolf in sheep's clothing in regards to my personal struggles. I'm an early millennial, and as many people of my generation, I too was made believe by my democratic parents that I could be anything. That I'm free, that I don't have to be home by 7, and that I can become an astronaut if I want that. And of course, I'm certainly more free than my mother was, whose only vacation destinations were Poland and Usedom during the separation of Germany. But I still am bound by certain bars. They are just not that visible these days. That I can be anything I want sounds great in theory, and I know that my mother meant really well. But it would have done all of us some good if our parents had been a bit more specific about it. Because I can indeed not become an astronaut without a master in the STEM field. And it would have been neat to know that before I decided not to go to university and instead just do whatever I want. Now, don't get me wrong. There are, of course, numerous advantages of democracy and freedom. And apart from political advantages, self-actualization is one of them, and I'm a big fan of that. But this nowadays romanticized idea of endless freedom without restrictions that ideally encourages self-discovery and fosters creativity and diversity can very easily turn into a paradox of choice instead. Psychologist Barry Schwartz brought this paradox to the wider masses when saying that more is less. But the theory is not new, and I don't think that it needs a Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, or Plato to make you realize that you too are occasionally suffering from choice paralysis. The term existential dread might not have come over your lips until now, but it probably will once this video is over. My sincere apologies for this unpleasant and unsolicited insight. The paradox of choice is most commonly used in the context of consumer behavior. Especially in North America, it is easy to get sucker punched by abundance. When I immigrated to Canada from Germany, I was so amused by the legions of supplements in the pharmacy that I took pictures of it to show it to my friends in Berlin. Seriously, who needs 15 kinds of vitamin C? Just grab some oranges. Now, the focus on commercial activities like picking the most whitening toothpaste or the most decadent cereal can make choice paralysis seem like something trivial that doesn't deserve to be linked to a term as dramatic as existential dread. However, every small decision carries a symbolic weight that accumulates over time, slowly but steadily feeding the belief that we are living suboptimally, wasting our time or missing out. Looked at it from that angle, more choices really just mean more opportunities for regret. With endless options on the table, we expect that the perfect option too has to be somewhere amongst them. And when reality doesn't match these inflated expectations, disappointment kicks in the door of our dream castle. And beware of the pursuit of perfection because, as I have mentioned in a similar way in my video about perfection, when trying to find the perfect choice, you might end up having no choice at all anymore. Swiping everyone on Tinder left will at some point have you sit in front of an empty singles roaster, making you sip pina colada at the tiki bar with your equally single best friend instead of a charming summer fling. Now, the psychological processes that lead you to be dissatisfied with whatever choice you make in regards to trivial things like chocolate bars apply to more profound choices as well, such as what career to pursue, whether to marry or not, and whom, and even what purpose to seek out in life as a whole. The existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre argued that with freedom comes responsibility, and that every choice we make defines us. I personally don't fully agree with defining one's whole existence through the choices that we make. But the notion that we are the sole authors of our lives does have its unnerving plausibility, because even if not necessarily life-defining, each choice can still be life-altering. It's easy to believe that you are bereft of a new iPhone because you chose to go on vacation in Brazil instead of Japan, or that your career failed because you chose to have kids instead of a goldfish. While these things might be true, they might just as well be not. Life is indeed irreversible. Our time and energy is limited, and thus every choice made does exclude others, leaving one to wonder in anguish about the paths not taken, which led Sartre to note that we are condemned to be free. And with all this anguish and dissatisfaction, no matter the decision made, existential dread finally arises when we confront the responsibility of giving our life meaning in its entirety. In a world of endless choices, the pressure to choose the right path can make you question whether your decisions align with a meaningful existence as a whole, and not just a meaningful relationship to your Netflix consumption in particular. Thus, as choices expand from daily conveniences to matters of identity, purpose, and future, the stakes can feel life-threatening. And as soon as we feel that we made way too many wrong choices, we might find that our free and unshackled life suffers from a severe absence of purpose. Psychoanalyst Erich Fromm explored the idea that too much freedom can lead to feelings of anxiety, isolation, and even insignificance. He suggested that people might even seek to escape freedom through conformity or submission to authority, mainly to find security and belonging. And that's exactly what I'm personally craving now that I'm facing my own chaotic crossroads. A desire for guidance that hopefully frees me mentally from having to make every single decision in my life myself. I never really had guidance, and restrictions even less so. And I can say from experience by now that this has made me have to live my life on hard mode. Because I didn't just have to decide where to go, but also how to get there. While the jolly and untamable soul I embody always has enjoyed the fact that my mother never forced me to go study medicine, or to get a real job instead of painting pretty pictures, I now have the feeling that I'm not living up to my potential. Because I constantly have been everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and never made it to a meaningful state with individual endeavors before jumping to the next one. The guidance and purposeful restriction that I now finally seek would actually lead to more freedom in return. Because a less burdened mind has the space and time to wander and marvel at random stuff at the roadside. And once again, freedom in general is of course desirable, especially as it gives a nice change from slavery and oppression, which are totally out of fashion. But the double-edged sword of endless freedom can leave you without clear goals and a sense of direction, without purpose and a certain restrictiveness that makes sense for you and the world around you. Chances are high that you will be facing that existential dread. And that may be when it's finally too late to opt for a career in social work instead of elevator operation. Now, restriction doesn't have to be enforced by another person or institution though. This is usually the material of politics, and again, you won't see me opening that can of worms. Freedom is best experienced within self-imposed limits. It's really about setting boundaries. Thus, I would like to encourage you to take matters into your own hands. Make intentional choices and instead of endless freedom, pursue genuine freedom. For Erich Fromm, true and genuine freedom, or positive freedom as he called it, involves things like authenticity, autonomy, spontaneity, and connection. Next to developing your own values and self-awareness. For Fromm, it's also about meaningful connections with others as a counterbalance to isolation. It's not just about the absence of constraints, but about the meaningful engagement with life and the collective responsibility. And all of that requires restrictive choices, because you can't just do whatever you want where communities are concerned. True fulfillment often comes from choosing meaningful limitations, like committing to a vocation or relationship or philosophy, which in return leads to true freedom, because it grounds your choices and actions in meaningful purpose, enabling you to exercise autonomy and self-realization without being enslaved by external forces or internal chaos. Living impulsively and indulging every whim leads to shallow careers and shallow relationships. But you don't want a shallow life. What you want, I hope, is a worthwhile existence. And to get there, you first need to gain some structure through aligning your decisions with your personal values, your long-term goals, and a general sense of community, instead of short-term gratification and reckless individualism. Next, you need to start embracing good enough to avoid a headache. Nobel laureate Herbert Simon introduced the concept of satisficing in the 1950s. He argued that humans aren't even capable of maximizing decisions in the face of unlimited choices due to cognitive limitations, meaning that we can impossibly compute every single outcome for every single option given. It's impossible to arrive at the perfect choice in profound affairs like your identity or place in the world, when you already suffer mental overload from choosing a pair of shoes. So reduce stress and satisfice instead of trying to optimize. And lastly, practice gratitude. Appreciate the choices that you made and the outcome of it, rather than dwelling on the 975 alternatives. Show regret and dissatisfaction the door. They're outdoor cats that will just ruin your furniture. In a world that often equates happiness with the ability to do anything at any time, restriction sounds like something undesirable, something that encumbers and suffocates. But that's just the case if you define it as such, which in itself is quite limiting. Seeing restriction as something purely negative narrows your perspective and focus in life in ways you might not even realize. Such a rigid view doesn't take into account all the complexities of being human. Complexities that can be made less daunting by a little bit of getting structured and quite a lot of staying curious. Thanks for watching. I'm a big proponent of therapy, especially if you think that you don't need it. And I'm also a big proponent of likes and subscribes, especially if you think that yours don't count. Rest assured that they do. Don't look so serious. Boundaries. Balance. Parents. Encourage this. Oh my god. Come on, you got this. Oh, that was correct. True and true. True. Each choice with psychoanalysis. Lead you to be this blah blah. Dissatisfied.